Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Well, all right, Danny Freed of Blueprint, thanks for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course. Well, for the people that may or may not know about Blueprint, what is Blueprint?
Yeah. Well, at the simplest level, we're a technology company. We help therapists spend less time on paperwork so they can spend more time with their patients, their clients. I think, that sounds somewhat simple, but fundamentally under the hood, what we're trying to do is we're trying to shift really the relationship therapists have with their tools. If you just think about existing tools out there on the market today that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years, most of them in our space basically ask the clinician to record what they've done, whether that be documenting a session or filling out a form or generating and submitting a claim. And we're trying to flip that so that the system really works for them and the system can actually take work off their plate, again, so they can focus on delivering amazing mental health care to more people. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. We can get into more of the details, but I think highest level, that's the thing. We call it an AI-assisted EHR today. There's obviously been a evolution over the years to how we got there, but that's Blueprint today.
Yeah, talk about that evolution. I mean, I know a little bit. We got connected in 2018, and I've had the privilege and joy of watching Blueprint arc over to where you are now. But can you talk a little bit about you guys were started in 2014, no?
2019.
2019, okay. So 2019 to 2026.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny you say 2014 because I do feel like the kernel for Blueprint started well before the company started. I mean, maybe just even a little bit of background on how I got into this world and my own background. I don't come from healthcare or mental health care. I really have a background in technology, and more specifically, before Blueprint, I was building different consumer software apps and companies and products. The whole reason I got sucked into mental health care is because along the way of doing some of that stuff, I lost one of my best friends to bipolar disorder. And that actually happened in 2013. So that was the seed. 2014, 2015, 2016, and the next couple of years, I slowly but surely started just immersing myself in this space. I had no intention of starting this company, but I was just genuinely trying to better understand what my friend had been going through. So that was sort of like Blueprint, version 0 before Blueprint was even a thing. These conversations were happening, and the thing I noticed in that time period was through conversations with providers. I caught glimpses of the tools they were using, and I basically couldn't look away once I started to see this because in my day job at the time, I was building tools for personal stylists at a company called Trunk Club, and we had built a pretty impressive platform there. It was very cutting edge. This was like 2015, 2016. And it felt like the therapists were 10 or 20 years behind the personal stylists. Nothing against personal stylists, but I think we could probably agree that that's backwards and therapists should have at least as good of tools. So that was kind of the genesis. And then we started by just solving one problem at a time. And the first problem was trying to help therapists collect more data outside of a session and then trying to help them make the most of that data to help inform treatment decisions. And then we sort of stumbled into this problem that was getting in the way of that, which was documentation, and therapists are really drowning in documentation. And so then we launched our Scribe, and then therapists started asking us to do what we did for documentation for all the other things they're tasked with doing outside of care and in support of care, whether it's scheduling or billing, or even just getting more insights before and after a session. And that sort of led us to be the full stack solution today that we are, the AI-assisted EHR.
Yeah, I remember I had heard about Blueprint before we met, and the measurement-based care stuff was very, very cool. And it has just seemed like you all just tackle mountain after mountain of like measurement-based care is really important because value-based care is here, and that conversation's not going away. And then AI showed up and scribing is a thing, and that makes a ton of sense for AI. And then now EHR, which that has been in development for a year, a little more, less than a year, right?
A little less. Yeah, we just launched February. I mean, you could argue it's been sort of on our minds since the very beginning. But I think we always had we always had a belief from the very beginning that we wanted to be the full operating system. Just back to sort of the glimpse of these tools I saw way back when, you can't just do a piece of that and sort of call it a day. There's more problems to solve. And so we've been asked for the last, I guess, 6 years up until we finally launched it, if and when we were going to be launching or building an EHR. And so it was pretty clear that at some point we would want to try and do that. And it was all just about making sure we took the right steps to do it, because it's no small feat. And I think it's gotten easier with AI and some of the developments there, but it's still a big responsibility and a lot to build and manage, and lots of mission critical stuff running through that, whether it's the scheduling or the notes or the system of record or the billing that, you can't afford to slip up.
It's a really critical infrastructure. Peel the curtain back just a little bit. What makes it so complicated for non-technical people to understand?
I think the biggest thing is that it's just the source of truth, right? And so just on that point, there's no margin for error of data being lost. There's no margin for error on data getting mixed up between, different accounts. You've got to really architect this system where that stuff is not possible. And then you've got to make sure you go through the motions properly to QA these things that you're building. And that sort of doesn't go away, but we've gotten through a lot of the foundational build of that over the first, 3 to 6 months. Sidebar, it's sort of wild that we're now able to get to that point after 3 or 6 months. I think AI and our internal use of AI to build these things has made this possible, because I think maybe even 3 years ago, it would have taken years rather than months to get this off the ground. So that's definitely a piece of it. I think the other piece, which you know very well, that's very complicated, and there are many edge cases too, is just insurance and billing insurance and the whole life cycle around billing insurance. And we sometimes joke, you've processed one claim and you've processed one claim. There are patterns, but a lot of it, especially for a while, is pretty nuanced, and the behaviors of payers change and the responses from payers and the data changes. And it's pretty fundamental for a therapist of how they're getting paid. And so you've got to really be on that. And it's kind of a never ending journey, but we're in a good spot today. So
yeah, I was telling your team at ACA, where we sponsored and did a lot of cool stuff. If I dropped Danny Freed on a planet that needed a healthcare system, you would never, and I mean never, build the system we have in the United States. You would never on purpose go, that's a good deal. Let's do that. You'd build something way more efficient, but that's the challenge that you have to build in this really inefficient world. So why was it, so other than client demand, which is really, really great, and all of your tools have been amazing over the years, but why is it necessary to build the entire house rather than just staying specialized ambient listening, ambient notes, and then measurement-based care?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of both wanted to and never wanted to from the very beginning. And that's why we kept putting it off, because we knew it was going to be, a big step for us to take. I think the short answer is what we're focused on arming therapists with amazing tools, amazing technology. Much of today, that means powered by AI, so they can go and do their best work. And so their clients can then be the best versions of themselves. And so it's really just a matter of how do we go and do that? How do we go and give ourselves the best chance at doing that? And we work with individual practitioners, and we work with small groups, and we work with large groups, and we work with the largest of the large behavioral health organizations in the country. And the way that we bring that AI, we bring those tools, we bring that technology to the clinicians within those either single person or very large organizations differs. And the reason we're building our own EHR really comes down to the tools that currently exist and currently have market share and user bases for the small groups and for the individual practices. And they don't allow integrations, whether that's a strategic choice or a capability, no one will really say, but no one's interested in integrating. They all want to be all in one. And, there's reasons for that. I think those reasons tend to be a little bit more company centered than therapist centered, but it is what it is. And, we tried for many years to try and get those companies to partner with us and open up their APIs and all these things, because we wanted to give therapists a better experience. We wanted to solve the problems they were asking us to solve that these other, platforms or companies weren't solving. And we just made no headway. And so eventually we said, you know what, screw it. If we want to go and achieve this goal, we've got to go and be the EHR, and let's go and do it. And so that's what we've done. But it's interesting because the larger orgs, the ones using other systems that do allow APIs and and they have partnerships, and it's much more of an open ecosystem with interoperability. We're not the EHR. We have no interest in really being the EHR market for these larger orgs. And we can still deliver a world-class experience with our AI because we can just integrate right into those EHRs. And so it's a little bit of a means to an end. It's a little bit of a kind of the only way we've been able to go about solving some of these problems. With that, it also opens up a bunch of doors with this fully integrated experience of things you can do that you might not be able to otherwise do when you sort of own the full stacks. That's kind of the genesis behind it.
Well, and EHRs have plagued the mental and behavioral health industry for a long time, partly because each state is different, each payer is different. But I have a sense that what Blueprint is doing is different, right? I mean, you're the technical guy, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard or read somewhere that Epic is built on technology from like 1954, and they're not making any like significant stride to update the system, which is 1954 was like, we didn't have a space shuttle that went to the moon yet, like just for like relative scale. And then along comes Blueprint, very tech forward and also very innovative in your pricing model. So how are you making those two things work? Like cutting edge technology and tools with a pricing model that seems very unique.
Yeah, well, it's just a tangent on Epic. What's wild, I feel like Epic they catch a lot of flack for not having great interoperability, but when we actually look at what Epic offers versus what the players in our space offer that really deal with the individual practitioners, Epic looks like like perfect child, like their level of interoperability, where there is a path and you maybe have to go through their system and their hoops, and maybe you've got to pay some tolls along the way to them, but at least there's a path, and people do integrate into Epic all the time.
Oh, wow.
So it's even worse, I think, for practitioners. I don't sort of know exactly why that came to be. I think part of it's just the way the market is shaped, and a lot of those individual practitioners, it's just them and they run their own business. And then I think just back to the pricing question, as we were sort of studying this and thinking about this, we looked at the market and we wanted to try and figure out, why does the world need another EHR in this space?
That's a great question.
We sort of thought about, because there's hundreds of them, right? Literally hundreds,
question,
just in mental health that serve small groups and individuals. There's so many out there. And we spent a bunch of time thinking about this. We spent a bunch of time thinking about, why are people using Blueprint today? And I think where we landed was this realization that I'll just call them the legacy EHRs, the EHRs that you're thinking of and they've been around for a little while. They really serve mental health practitioners. They essentially charge an access fee for therapists to then have the privilege of doing the work themselves, right? So you pay this monthly fee, and then in return, you get to log in and you get to do your own notes, and you get to do your billing, and you get a place to store all this stuff. And those platforms mostly become the place where the work happens, but you're still doing all of that work. And that sort of didn't make sense to us, because we would just hear about all these things that were getting in the way of a therapist delivering great care, right? It was all the work they were having to do. And so fundamentally, when you think about what these legacy EHRs do, and even just what an EHR is, it's an electronic health record. It's storing this information. And the cost of storage has essentially gone to zero. Yet you see a lot of these EHRs that are primarily storing your data, your information, they're actually increasing their prices year over year. And they're not adding typically much, if anything, but most therapists keep paying because switching EHRs has been historically pretty painful. And
yeah, it sucks.
And they're trapped, and they're trapped in what I call point and click hell. So we tried to flip the model. And what we do is we say, look, here's the EHR. It's free. We don't make any money by you storing information on our platform, and the cost of doing so is negligible. And so we'll eat it. Instead, we make money through our AI assistant, and we only make money when that assistant actually does work for you, whether that be drafting a note or submitting a claim or updating a treatment plan. There's a whole list of different things the assistant does, and it's all usage-based. So our incentives are very well aligned. The more work you essentially hire this assistant to do through the software, the more value we deliver, the more you pay. And if not, then the less you pay. And it fluctuates even for therapists with smaller caseloads versus larger caseloads, or they take a couple months off for maternity leave. Like, it just aligns to the work they're doing and the value they're getting out of the software. And so we think that that's pretty disruptive. And we think it's also just what therapists deserve versus the opposite of getting charged more and more and more just for the privilege of being able to log in and do the work yourself, the same work you were doing last year.
Yeah, that's great. You were very quotable there for a minute. Point and click hell is very, very good. And the other benefit that you have to usage-based pricing is only when the AI assistant kicks in?
That's right. We do it session-based today, because we want to keep it simple, and everything sort of ties back to a session. For us, all the work we're doing tends to tie back to a session. And also that's how a therapist gets paid typically as well. And then there's different tiers. They can sort of access different AI features within different tiers, but it's all based on how many sessions they're running in a given.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think through like with billing in particular. And I know, well, where are you guys at with like automated billing? Like the robots taking over all billing for Blueprint?
One day. There's obviously lots of nuance. So, I'd say we're early on that journey. There's a lot we want to do. We also think about how do we make it more accessible for more therapists to have, a great billing experience like the ones that you provide to all your guys, and how do we enable maybe a part-time therapist, for example, to have that experience, and maybe then they can graduate to a full-time therapist, maybe then they can grow their practice. I still think there's a place where once you reach some critical mass, like you're going to want a biller or billing team, but I think there's a lot of work we can do up until that point, and perhaps even in partnership with a billing team at that point. Well, one of the things I'm excited about so far that we've done is related to eligibility checks.
Gosh, talk more, Danny.
So like one of the things that we kept hearing about was, I can run these eligibility checks through most of these platforms, but they don't really tell me what I'm actually trying to figure out. They give me a bunch of data back. That data may or may not be accurate. And even if it is accurate, it's hard to find the actual answers to the questions that I'm interested in. And so we just recently, like a couple of weeks ago, launched our AI eligibility check feature. And what it basically does is it lets a therapist ask questions about this eligibility check, and it proactively answers some of the main questions you might want to know. Maybe a client has like a $2,000 deductible and there's $500 remaining, and they've got 20% coinsurance and your rate's $150. And as a therapist, you might have to calculate all that. The client typically wants to just know, like, what are my out-of-pocket costs, right? It's like a simple question and a very complicated answer. And so we help do that math, and then we can help also recalculate that, because obviously in certain cases that's going to depend on, well, what are the other services you're using and other providers and whatnot. And so that math is sort of shifting almost in real time. And so we're excited about how AI and technology there can abstract sort of the process, and you just ask a question and you get an answer. Or even better, you don't even have to ask the question, and you just have the answer at your fingertips when you need it. So there's a lot more. And so we want to sort of keep working through the claim lifecycle, and we want to help with making sure claims get submitted and giving you the best chance of success. We want to help with some of the rate benchmarking stuff. You definitely want to help with some of the back and forth follow-up that's often required. I mean, I've heard too many stories about therapists literally breaking down in tears after spending 3 hours on the phone with insurance companies and then getting disconnected to try and track down one claim, where it's like, at that point, the math just doesn't make sense, because you're better off just seeing the next client, but you're leaving money on the table, and it's this helpless, unfair feeling, and it just feels like no one's sort of fighting for you. And so there's a bunch we want to do from that angle. We're sort of just getting going in some of that stuff. But,
no, that's great. I mean, all of that is really, really exciting. We just interviewed Nicole Brewer, because we're doing practice audit episodes, and they're really fun. And, we're talking about certain payers that get their credentialing information messed up all the time, right? Mm-hmm. This is complicated. And so we were talking about, well, is it worth keeping the payer, right? So sort of like holding the payer on trial in her practice. And we ran through some of the math, and it's like, all right, let's say conservatively you're spending $8,000 to $10,000 at the best case scenario, $30,000 at the worst case scenario, just trying to fight for these appeals and denials. And from me to you, Danny, I mean, billers should be really ecstatic about the idea that there's a tool that can either reduce that cost to zero or recover a lot of that money at a usage-based cost, which, I don't know, throwing out numbers, but let's say even if it costs $4 a claim for that to happen, that's way too, you're the math guy. So like right now, it costs a company $25 biller time to rework a denial, right? So even if that cost is $4, right, per claim denial, that's still way less than what you're going to pay for a biller to do it. So that's kind of the scale that we're talking about, times however many.
A lot.
Claim, right. Like 70 million claims a year. So
yeah, I mean, well, back to your original point about the healthcare system, like I think one of the key vectors of what makes our system inefficient is there's just like so much waste back and forth. And so like what you just described is essentially a process of eliminating some of this back and forth waste. And of course, there's sort of opportunity within that, but through the motive of reducing this unnecessary, inefficient back and forth cat and mouse game. And again, to your point, it would be a whole lot better if there could just be better coordination and better incentive alignment and better, partnership. But we also do sort of have to work within the confines of the current system, at least in the short term, while trying to fix the long term.
Yeah, you and I are agreed on that. Like, I can't change the policy, right? Now we can know the policy really well, or better yet, AI can know the policy really well. We can figure it out. But that's a great perspective. We'll get right back to the podcast episode, but first let me ask you a question. Who is the highest paid insurance biller in your practice? If you're the one doing your billing, the answer is you. If you're the practice owner and you're a clinician, you know the drill. You do the hard work, you deliver great services. And then there's this waiting game. There's billing after hours and on weekends and during birthday parties, or you go to the office for a quote unquote quick visit. And then you look up at your clock and all of a sudden you've been there for 3 or 4 hours doing billing. Following up on claims is tedious and it creates a massive bottleneck for your cash flow. And that's exactly why Practice Solutions does billing for practices that take insurance. We take your practice's billing completely off your plate. Our team handles everything from eligibility and benefits to charging cards to posting payments, following up on denials. And we deal with insurance companies every single day so that you can focus on growing the practice. It's time to stop stressing over the billing and getting back to what you do best, which is running your business as best as you can. Head over to practicesol.com today to schedule your free consultation to see if our done-for-you billing services are right for you. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Where are you guys at with you're looking at a mountain of problems, right, in the insurance world, right? You and I both look at those and attacking them from different directions. But what about prior authorization? Is that something that you guys are thinking through? Because the parity law is not something that's top of mind at the moment.
I mean, I think the entire life cycle of going from I have no clients in my practice today to I am growing my practice, both in how I'm getting paid, when I'm getting paid, et cetera, growing even beyond that is, I would say, in the realm of things that we're thinking about. We haven't yet spent a bunch of time on prior auths. It hasn't come up a bunch for us. There's definitely certain cases where it's really painful, but for the individual therapist, I don't think it's the number one thing that they've asked us for. I hope that remains to be true. It would sort of be unfortunate if that bubbles up all of a sudden, but it's definitely something we're thinking about. We've started with some of these, I'd say higher frequency touch points, like the eligibility checks and possibly the claim follow-ups and some of the just standard life cycle stuff. We can handle prior auth, but we're not doing anything particularly interesting or unique there quite yet.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
It's an interesting space. It's another back and forth sort of game of cat and mouse, right?
Well, it's just a ridiculous drain on provider time, right? Like 20% of all claims go through some kind of prior authorization process. Oh, it's a lot. That's a lot of claims, right? And so it would be really interesting to see how you guys are handling that in the future. I mean, that could for sure change. But how is Blueprint handling like AI can do a lot of stuff, right? And I'm sure is that overwhelming for you guys to think through all the application of AI in the EHR space?
I think it's exciting, honestly.
Okay, right.
We just get fired up about it. I think we've always been, and I think this is intentional, been very good at trying to be problem focused as a company, not technology or solution focused. It's sometimes hard, especially when the technology is really cool and exciting, but we've tried to be really diligent in staying problem focused and then finding the right technology or tool for the job. AI is one of those sort of cross-function things that seems to help with a lot of stuff in a lot of different ways, but I don't know. We've always had better luck starting with that problem and then kind of working out.
Let's talk about patient care then, because I think one of the problems that exists is pairing up the measurement-based care element and finding areas of opportunity when a patient is plateauing or needs an intervention. What's the landscape look like in Blueprint for AI to find flagging treatment? Is that a reality today, or is that something that's down the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much in our roots, right? Just back to how we got started. It was all about helping therapists leverage data to make the best possible treatment decisions and enhance the therapeutic experience. So we're at our core is very deeply motivated to help therapists help their clients, not just take care of admin work, but also how do we enhance that therapeutic experience. I think we also have a really strong opinion on what our role is in that. We are the assistant. The therapist makes the decisions And that word assistant is very intentional. We thought about this a lot when we were first rolling this out. We're not a co-pilot. Like, we are not equal. We work for the therapist. Our assistant works for the therapist. And that hierarchy is actually really important, and I think shapes a lot of how we think about AI's role in aiding the therapist and enhancing the sort of like the care experience. One of the things that has surprised us and how therapists are using our assistant has been to sort of like sharpen their own clinical thinking in real time. So it's some of the basic stuff is help me summarize what we talked about last session, give me a recap of what we talked about last session. But I think what's been more interesting and more surprising and more powerful in many ways has been something like, I'm working on exposure therapy with this client and I'm starting to hit a wall. What approaches might help? And our assistant has all of this context on who you are as a therapist, your experience delivering care, the client's journey, and we're understanding sort of what's happening session by session. We're understanding the treatment plan. We've got that as an artifact in our system. We've got these progress notes, and our assistant is trained on sort of the latest and greatest peer-reviewed literature out there as well. And so it's not coming back and saying, do this, but it is surfacing up and guiding the clinician to sort of consider some other options, some other pathways, some other interventions, and can give them feedback on what they've done so far. And it can do so without having to ask a million and one questions because it's got all of this context. And so
yeah, my mind
that's
immediately
been pretty cool
went,
to see.
No, that's very exciting. My mind immediately went to like, oh, it kind of sounds like what a supervisor would do, but that's not at all what you're describing. What you're articulating is like a sparring partner for the therapist to be able to like riff a little bit and to speak the therapist's treatment language and make a good decision that's informed. Because like therapists do not have time to read all the peer-reviewed literature. Like, totally. But that'll be your responsibility to make sure that the AI assistant is up to date and not hallucinating. And what are some of the challenges there? I mean, because AI is not like perfect in that regard.
Yeah, so totally. I mean,
what does that look like?
Hallucination is definitely a risk, right? And especially when you get into this realm, like you've got to be really thoughtful about how you build these systems you can't eliminate it. And that's why I think we always try to craft this in a way where the therapist is positioned to still use their brain, still review. We're not telling them to do this. We're telling them to consider these couple of things and to sort of explore it more. But because we have all of this context flowing through Blueprint, right? Like we start with the transcript, and that's sort of the underlying like kernel for the session. And then out of that transcript, we're helping to draft a progress note. The therapist is reviewing and approving that. We're helping to draft a treatment plan from that transcript through AI. The therapist is reviewing and approving that. There's summaries, there's other artifacts that sort of then get inputted into Blueprint or pre-inputted into Blueprint. And so then when we're going in answering a question about exposure therapy, we can actually use those artifacts as first-party data sources. And so by doing so, it's very different than if you were to go ask ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is trained on the entire internet, and the entire internet may be accurate, may not be accurate, may be relevant, may not be. It's a little bit, it's pretty good, but it's, you get into some spaces where it's just wrong, but it's very confident that it's right. And so we're by no means perfect, but by trying to center in on the context that comes through Blueprint and then make that sort of like first party truth data because the therapist has signed off on this note, right? It's helpful. And I think it keeps it much more straight line focused.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with chat, right, is you don't want it pulling some 17-year-old with 25 million whatever thumbs who's like pointing at the thing, like giving you like treatment recommendations, you want clinicians give you treatment recommendations based on.
You want clinical grade AI, I think is, it's a different level. And so,
which
chat is a great,
We don't need to talk bad about anybody, but it sounds like what you're doing is very novel. How would you know if an EHR goes, hey, AI this or that? How would you know it's clinical grade versus chat grade?
It's hard to know. I think it's a spectrum, right? And I would say clinical grade AI is many things. I think it starts with like who's around the table helping to think about these systems. Is it great clinicians who have the knowledge both on the technology side and the clinical side? Are they collaborating with experts on the technology side and the product experience side? And so I think it's all of these things together. And then I think there's certain attributes within, but I think it's a spectrum, but I think also like a therapist would know pretty well when they're using it.
1,000%, yeah.
It's not that one or the other is helpful or not in a binary sense, but as you start to get into the questions like the one I just said, like it will become very, very obvious in what it can do. And it's a combination of having the right context combined with the right sort of clinical grade AI on top of that. But that context is also really important because chat doesn't have that context, right? It doesn't have your appointments, it doesn't have your notes, it doesn't have your treatment plans. And so it's almost, that context is almost a little more important in many ways, but you really need both.
It's super important. I mean, I've told this story a few times, but I tried to see if Gemini could translate like written notes to like tasks or actionable notes, right? And I wrote test and I took a photo and it gave like, this is the paragraph that you wrote. I'm like, that's not what I wrote. And so there are problems with it, but it sounds like you guys have a very like academic way of approaching the technology here. So
Yeah.
have you guys thought about, like, we've talked about benchmarking a little bit, like you touched on that. Now that we have the benchmarking data, right, which is so funny because the payers call it transparency data and it's not anything but transparent. It's very, very tricky. Have you thought about what Blueprint could do for those that fall in like a 10th or 20th percentile reimbursement rate for their market relative to treatment outcomes?
Yeah, for sure. I think first we want to get really good at identifying those in real time, especially these newer therapists who just they don't even know, right? It's just the contract they were given, and just getting to a contract, getting in network, going through the credentialing, all of that is also no small feat for a lot of the same reasons. So I think we're starting there, and we've started some stuff there, and then I think we already have the ability to draft letters in Blueprint. Letters for different purposes, right? So the way that works is you can give it a query to write a letter about, let's just say, a referral letter to a psychiatrist for a client. And when you go and ask it to write this letter, it's going to go and try and figure out what are all the points of data and what's all the context I need to go and write this letter. What's the objective of this letter? It might ask the therapist for some clarifying information first too, of who's this letter to, what's the purpose. So you can think about that as a letter writing tool that could be then applied in a bunch of different ways, one of which might be able to write a letter to an insurance company or to a rep at an insurance company and make hopefully a pretty compelling case, leveraging the benchmark data, leveraging the outcomes data, leveraging other data points that live in Blueprint as well, perhaps, to try and make a case to then get your rate up to market standards, up to that benchmark.
Sure.
I think it's exciting. And some of the stuff you've been doing in that space is super exciting because I think like step one is just, we got to shine a light on this. We got to make this, if the payers aren't going to make this transparent, we've got to make this transparent.
We got to do it. Yeah.
Because
and the law says it's out there, right? So like the questions we've gotten is like, how's this legal? Well, it's on their website. We're just translating it into usable data, but
it's definitely out there. As you've seen, it's not easy to interpret or read. You can fill in the blanks on why that might be, but
I mean, pricing is very important, and you know, you've been in the tech space for a while. The moment you know somebody's pricing a cost, you sort of know how to swing the dog, right, by the tail.
Right.
But yeah, the 5mm shift we've recommended is look up the rates before you credential, because credentialing can be a 6-month process before you see a rate, right? Why waste 6 months? Go look at the rate data and see if the median rate is fair, right, relative to your size and expenses and all that stuff. So that's a 5mm shift that'll save you about 6 months of headache. So don't do it. But that's like a really great applicable point for Blueprint, right? Like, hey, I'm interested in credentialing with whoever. What's the median rate? What's the 10th percentile rate? And then like give me a sense of what that looks like, right?
Totally.
So all that's extremely exciting. So I can't wait to see what you guys do there. So AI is everywhere. We're just at ACA. Saw your team there. They're great. They're super fun to work with. Gift boxes, all of that. But the exhibit hall was packed with AI, right? There's a lot of AI messaging and noise. So how do you guys make sure that the technology is enhancing the human connection between patient and therapist rather than either replacing it or making it feel, it's like, you know, when an AI email is coming through, right? I mean, it just sounds different. It reads different. What is your thinking around enhancing human connection?
Yeah, I mean, we've thought a lot about this. I skipped a step in our background and journey because before Blueprint was Blueprint, we actually were a consumer-facing app. I don't think we had met yet.
I didn't know that.
It was the precursor to Blueprint. It was called Joy. Not a lot of people know about this, but yeah, I got started. It was just me at the time, and I was interested in building and solving some of these problems. And just given my background, came at it from a consumer angle, and so we built this chatbot. It was like 2016 or 2017.
No
it
kidding.
was more of a like, I'd say, reflection tool, support bot, journaling thing that gave you back interesting insights that you could go then dig into. It was using, called it machine learning at the time,
there
but
you go.
a flavor of AI. I think we had something like 100,000 people who had used that over a year or two. And so like there was real traction building, but that led us to build Blueprint, and we pivoted to this clinician facing thing because I think what we realized in that process was, as perverse as some of the incentives might be within healthcare and how messed up some of that stuff is, when you think about a consumer app, the incentives are actually fairly clear, which is your goal is ultimately going to be to drive engagement and to build your business. You're going to want to retain these individuals. You're going to want them to get you to pay something, or someone else like ads to get you to pay something. And either way, any way you slice it, you want these people coming back. And that is sort of, it goes against, I think, how most therapists will think about this. And there's actual ethical guidelines and standards and governing boards that make this clear that, like, there's a point in therapy where the right thing to do is to discharge this client when they're ready. And those standards, those guidelines, those governing bodies, they don't really exist for these consumer technology companies that are posing as support bots or therapy bots or whatever. And it's not that they can't be helpful. I think there's certainly a place, but I think those incentives are tricky to solve because that's just sort of the nature of the beast. So anyways, that aside, I think, like, again, our role in this is we want to be the assistant, and we really see ourselves as working for the therapist. The therapist makes the decisions. We're not equal. It's not even really a feature. It's sort of just like a core value of ours. And that shows up everywhere. And so a lot of what a therapist ends up doing on Blueprint is reviewing and approving, especially with a lot of the core workflows.
Oh, very interesting.
Drafting a note and updating a treatment plan and submitting a claim. Blueprint and our assistant takes a first pass at it based on this context, and it serves up that draft. And then the therapist's job shifts from writing the note to reviewing and editing if needed and approving the note. And same goes for a claim and a treatment plan and what have you. And what also happens is, as they make edits, we understand the edits and the types of edits that they're making. So that might be they're changing it from patient to client. And we understand that, we store that as a preference. And then the next time we generate a note, we're going to incorporate that. And so the goal would be the review and approve. There's sort of like fewer differences in between what we generate the first time and what they end up finalizing. But the therapist is very much in the loop and they're still very much in control. And so I think that's a fundamental way to make sure the therapist is able to do more of what they're great at, more of what they love, working with their clients. And AI is there sort of in the background to support them, whether that be clearing the path on admin stuff or enhancing how they deliver care in certain ways. I think it's very much in that order, as opposed to, putting AI talking to patients and making diagnoses. And I think there is a world for that. I think it's just, you want therapists in the loop on this stuff because it really changes the game in the incentive structure, and it really changes the game in what these things can do, what AI can do when you've got a therapist in the loop.
Well, it does seem like that. And it seems like you could go from, well, you tell me, is it like appointment, session, notes to claim in like 15 minutes? I mean, is that fair, or is it much faster than that?
Much faster. We have a single button. Yeah, and part of it depends on how much you're reviewing and how much you're editing, right? But it's possible to go from appointment ended to note done, treatment plan updated, insurance claim submitted, client invoiced in 1 to 2 minutes after a session concludes.
No way. 1 to 2 minutes.
One button click. Now, you don't get there right away, but as you build up this sort of memory and this context and these preferences, and the AI gets better and sort of understands you as a therapist.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
You can get there.
Whoa, that's very fast.
So the therapist moves into this like orchestrator or conductor or like editor role for a lot of the admin stuff. And that lets them then, for the care, when they're working with the client, like dial in. They've got all their focus there, and they've got the system in the background working for them on their behalf.
That's incredible. 1 to 2 minutes, that's like a conservative estimate, or like that's what you're seeing in real time?
That's what we're seeing. No, that's what we're seeing.
Okay.
It varies, right? It varies on how much reviewing, how much editing, how much approving takes. Sure. But yeah, it's certainly possible.
So, well, you said something there that's kind of interesting. It takes the AI assistant a little bit of time to acclimate. Is that fair? Yeah. What does that look like? How do you like sit down and have like 2 hours of coffee with AI assistant and you just chat about the practice, or how does that work?
No, not at all. It's very good right out of the gate, right? It's got to be good enough where you can see that this thing's going to be amazing. And I'd say in certain ways it is amazing right out of the gate. But it just starts to understand your preferences, and it starts to understand your practice, and it starts to understand the intricacies of how certain claims need to be submitted for certain payers and how that has been going over time. I think the notes example is the easiest one to understand. We're generating this artifact for you. You're then reviewing this artifact. You're making edits to that artifact as you see fit. And we're then extracting out of those edits, not what you changed specifically, but more the sort of like style and substance and tone. So the example was, instead of calling my clients patient in my notes, I call them client. Or instead of referring to myself as therapist, I refer to myself as counselor. And instead of having to make that change every single time, you just make the edit, and then the system figures out, well, what are the things I should remember for the next note and the next note and the next note. And so you don't have to do really much of any setup. You can go and configure your template or your format, but really you just use Blueprint. And the more you use Blueprint, the better it gets. And the way it does that is it starts to really understand you and your preferences around some of these different workflows and the journey for a client.
So how many notes or sessions or interactions does it take to get the AI assistant mature to know who Danny is?
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolution, right? So the more it sees, the better it gets. But it's very good after like just a day, right? Like you run a few sessions in Blueprint, it's understanding some of these patterns, so it doesn't take very.
Yeah, because one of the things that you learn about practice owners and clinicians in general is that they have specifications to how they do things that are unique to them, right? Times several 100,000 of them, right?
Totally.
So it's a lot of complexity, which I think is a problem only AI can solve. It's one of the reasons why like virtual assistants, even in AI, like an AI virtual assistant is tricky, right? Because they're just customizations that every clinician is going to need or want, and that's fine. You should have that.
Yeah.
But I think AI is the only flexible tool that can do that.
We started with, on the note stuff, we started with preferences, and it was a screen and you could choose these attributes, right? And we actually took it away, and people were not super excited at first. They still once in a while will be like, can I have my preferences back? Because there is this sense of control. But what we found is that AI was actually better at understanding the long tail of preferences that even an individual might not realize is a preference, but AI can get very good at understanding actually does influence whether a therapist thinks this note sounds like them or is right in their mind or not. Of course, there's like some rules that are standing this up that are more objective, but then all the subjective stuff around therapist style and tone and preference, which does matter to them. There's too many rules to build a rule-based system. It has to be this dynamic, memory-based kind of approach where it learns over time as you use it. Otherwise, A, they would have to spend forever filling out this huge mega form, and B, you could never build a form so big that it could contain all the possible attributes or possible preferences.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, it is very tricky, and I think it is one of those tools that over time we'll see applied in the billing and insurance world in a very, very helpful way. And I'm very pro AI. I know I'll eat that at some point, but it's very, very good. And we need more of that to solve some of these problems for sure. Because there's just no team in the world who's big enough to handle the keystrokes of the complexity of our system for sure. Totally. Well, what's got you excited in the next 12 months? So the last 9 months have been really electric for you guys. I'm sure you've been heads down working Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff, which is sort of the name of the game sometimes. But what's in the next 12 months that you feel like gets you really pumped?
I'm just excited to sort of continue applying this concept of therapist as a conductor or editor to all these different workflow areas, some of which we're still early on in, like billing, right? We talked about the eligibility check stuff, but we've got a lot more coming on that front, whether it be prior auths or claim follow-ups or status checks. And so I'm really excited to go deeper on that stuff. I think it's just exciting to think even, further out beyond 12 months, how the role of a therapist then changes and how much more they can hone in on their craft. They can focus in on their clients. For some, that might mean they want to take on a handful more clients. For others, that might mean they have better work-life balance. For others, that might mean they want to put it into growing their practice and doing other things. And I just think it's exciting to think about that future where therapists have great tools, great technology, and a great partner to help them build and grow their practice, run that practice efficiently, and then get paid more and get paid faster for doing this great work. So there's a lot of steps to get there, but I think the future is bright. I think AI is a helpful force in helping us get there. And if done responsibly, if done thoughtfully, it can be kind of the catalyst for, I think, a lot of that change. So that's what we're trying to do and what we're excited about.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Where do people follow along? Either they want to jump into Blueprint, the end of EHR, which I love that, by the way. I know that was a video you guys posted recently. I think that's a great thing to strive for. Where do they follow along to hear more, see more news? You guys have a newsletter or something that we can subscribe to?
Yeah. So the best place is our website, which is blueprint.ai. We have a monthly publication called The Golden Thread that we put out, and you can subscribe to that. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me directly if you want to chat, which is just Danny@blueprint.ai. And you can sign up for free on our website or book a call with our team.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like in like a really subscriber heavy world, Blueprint is a huge breath of fresh air in a lot of ways. So I'm excited and very bullish on Blueprint. So last question for you, Danny, but if you could go back to first year of doing Blueprint, what would you have told yourself back then?
Just keep going. I think that's the advice I give to other founders too, is just keep going. I mean, we obviously have kept going, but there's a lot of ups and downs. And, I think for me, the feedback that has kept us going and helped us push through some of those down moments where things are hard, or, you're 6 months out from launching this new platform and there's a lot to figure out, or whatever it might be. It's just the feedback we hear from therapists and their clients and how Blueprint is impacting them. So that's what I would probably tell myself, is it's going to get hard, but just keep going and be prepared, but do it and run even faster towards the goals, because it's all going to be worth it. So
I love it. Well, hey, thanks, Danny, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have 2 places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.